It was a little after 11 on a calm December night in Las Vegas, in the home of a young military family. Everything felt normal. Dinner was over, the kids were tucked in, and the father was getting ready to head out for another late shift. But when he stepped outside, the stillness was broken. A sudden burst of violence rang through the neighborhood. In just moments, the house that once felt warm and safe was thrown into chaos and fear. What unfolded that night would reveal long-buried secrets, shocking betrayals, and a conspiracy no one ever expected. Let's turn to today's case. Nathan Paet was born on February 12, 1982, on the island of Guam, a place where the sea is always close by, and traditions of family and community shape everyday life. He was one of 5 children born to Mateo and Carmelina Paet, and from the start, he was known for his kindness and generosity. Family and friends remember Nathan as warm and respectful. He was a devoted son, a helpful brother, and the kind of friend who could brighten any room with his energy and humor. At cultural gatherings, he was often the best dancer, moving with joy and pride in his heritage. Life on Guam deeply influenced who he was, and the island's natural beauty became part of him. He loved the water, spending hours surfing and paddleboarding, finding peace along the island's turquoise shores. As a teenager, Nathan fell in love with Michelle, the girl who would become his partner for life. They started dating in high school, and before long, they welcomed their first child. It wasn't easy starting a family so young, but their devotion to one another carried them through. Though far from the U.S. mainland, Guam is an American territory, giving residents like Nathan the chance to serve in the U.S. military. In April 2002, he enlisted in the United States Air Force, a decision that marked the beginning of a career that would take him far from the island, but never away from his family's heart. His first assignment was at Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska, where he joined the Aircraft Weapons Support Team. Moving from Guam's tropical heat to Alaska's icy cold was a huge change, but Nathan adjusted with determination. In 2006, he transferred to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona, where he rose to Chief of Weapons Loading for the Thunderbolt Ground Attack Aircraft Squadron. That same year, Nathan married Michelle, the only woman he had ever loved. They soon welcomed their second child, building a young but resilient family despite the challenges of military life. Nathan's career moved quickly. By 2007, he was training in logistics and materials management, expanding his skills. Later, at Nellis Air Force Base, he became an entry supervisor for the 99th Squadron. That year, he was promoted to junior non-commissioned officer in charge of maintenance supply, a role where he oversaw critical support for attack aircraft operations. Nathan's dedication to service was clear to everyone around him. His time in the Iraq War only strengthened his reputation as a hard-working and loyal airman, proud to wear the uniform of his country. When he returned, he and Michelle settled in Las Vegas, where they were raising 4 children. Family was at the center of Nathan's world. At home, he wasn't just a husband and father. He was also part of the community, coaching a local Dodgers T-ball team and working extra night shifts to provide more for his family. Michelle kept the household running, balancing the demands of raising 4 children while working in telemarketing, always standing by Nathan as he carried the weight of military life. By the time he was approaching his 28th birthday, Nathan had reached the rank of technical sergeant. Life seemed full and steady, a balance of duty, sacrifice, and the joy of raising a family. December 1st, 2010, began like any other day. Michelle, feeling unwell, came home earlier than usual. The family had dinner together, shared some quiet time, and Nathan, following his routine, lay down for a short nap in the living room. The evening seemed peaceful, with no sign of what was to come, when Nathan's alarm failed to go off. He woke suddenly around 11 p.m., realizing he was late for his shift. He threw on his camouflage uniform and rushed out the door just after 11:30, but only moments later. The calm of the neighborhood was shattered. Gunshots rang out in the night. Nathan stumbled back into the house, bleeding heavily. He had been shot 5 times. Collapsing inside, he left his wife and children in shock and terror. Michelle frantically dialed 911, her voice trembling as she begged for help. Following the operator's instructions, she tried CPR, but despite her efforts, and those of first responders, Nathan was pronounced dead. The scene was horrific. The garage door stood open, blood covered the floor and walls. And even his workout bench was stained. Paramedics had stripped away his uniform while fighting to save him, leaving it bloodied on the floor. Neighbors stood in disbelief. How could such violence strike this quiet street in suburban Las Vegas? For Michelle and the children, the loss was immeasurable. Nathan had been their protector, their provider, and the steady force in their lives. Detectives quickly turned their focus to Nathan's final hours. Michelle described the night in detail. How she had heard 2 loud bangs after Nathan left. But fear kept her from looking outside. Instead, she focused on calming the children, until Nathan staggered back through the door, gravely wounded. At the scene, investigators noted that nothing had been stolen. Nathan's wallet, keys, and personal items were still there. This was no robbery. Whoever pulled the trigger came with one purpose: to kill him. Detectives suspected the shooter may have been lying in wait, hidden across the street near 2 vacant, unlit houses. It seemed clear the killer knew Nathan's schedule and had chosen the exact moment when he would be most vulnerable, stepping out for his late-night shift. Detectives couldn't rule out any possibilities. At first, they wondered if Nathan might have been hiding personal troubles, debts, enemies, or even an affair that could have made him a target. But when they went through his phone, the evidence told a very different story. There were no suspicious calls, no hidden messages, no unexplained money transfers. His phone was filled only with photos of his wife and children. To investigators, this seemed to confirm what everyone said about him. Nathan was a devoted husband, a loving father, and a man without secrets. As police canvassed the neighborhood, new leads surfaced. Witnesses reported seeing a black car speeding away right after the gunshots. Others recalled a man in a brown or tan hoodie running from the area. For detectives, this was the first real trail to follow. News of Nathan's murder traveled quickly back to Guam. His parents, Mateo and Carmelina, were devastated. They boarded the first flight they could, traveling thousands of miles across the Pacific to Las Vegas. For Carmelina, the journey was unbearable. She wept the entire way, struggling to accept that her son was gone. When she finally arrived, Michelle collapsed in her arms, sobbing. Nathan's brother Eric and his wife Veronica also rushed to support the family. But before long, they were pulled into the investigation themselves. Detectives asked about Nathan and Michelle's marriage. On the surface, it seemed steady, but Veronica remembered something troubling during Thanksgiving. Just days earlier, the couple didn't look as close as they once had. To her, it felt as if they were simply tolerating each other. Eric added another concern when he visited the house. The pantry and refrigerator were nearly empty. To him, it looked like the family was under serious financial strain. Michelle later admitted in an interview that they had been struggling with money, which explained why Nathan was working exhausting double shifts. She also revealed something else. One of her coworkers drove a black car, similar to the one spotted near the crime scene. Under pressure, Michelle admitted she sometimes flirted with men at work, opening a door to cracks in the marriage investigators hadn't known about. This led them to Michael Rodriguez, a 31-year-old coworker with a history of forgery and theft. When police questioned Michael, he denied having any romantic connection with Michelle and insisted he had nothing to do with Nathan's murder. But digital evidence began to paint a different picture. Texts between Michelle and Michael raised immediate red flags. Just before the shooting, Michael sent a cryptic message, mentioning a contract and a client named Van Dyke. Investigators suspected this was coded language linked to Nathan's death. Then came the most chilling detail. At 11:12 p.m., only minutes before Nathan was shot, Michael texted Michelle saying he hoped she was feeling better and that he was close to finishing the Van Dyke contract by morning because it had been such a headache. 2 minutes later, he followed up, thanking her for her help and asking if she needed rest. To detectives, this suggested coordination, a plan in motion. At 11:19 p.m., shortly after Nathan rushed out the door, Michelle sent Michael a message of her own. She told him she had taken her medication and was going back to sleep, but added that her husband had just left. What struck investigators most was her casual mention that being late with the contract was annoying. The coded language seemed impossible to dismiss. When pressed, Michael claimed he had an alibi. He said that around 9 p.m. he met a woman named Shannon, a former adult film actress, at a department store. According to him, They felt an instant connection and decided to check into the Sunset Station Hotel for a one-night fling. He insisted they arrived around 11 p.m., which, if true, would have placed him away from the crime scene. With no solid evidence to disprove his story, detectives had little choice but to release Michael while they worked to verify his alibi. But soon, a dramatic twist changed everything. A woman came forward, her identity at first kept hidden. It was Shannon. Tearful and frightened, she admitted Michael's story was a lie. She told investigators she had been pressured into giving him an alibi and promised a small amount of money in return. Her confession brought two new names into the case: Jessica, a young woman, and her partner Corey, a seasoned criminal with a long record that included robbery, auto theft, armed robbery, and fraud. According to Shannon, she and Michael had actually been at Jessica and Corey's apartment in Henderson the night of the murder. Around 11 p.m., Michael and Corey left in a black Cadillac. Jessica told her they were targeting a drug dealer and needed Shannon to act as their alibi. While the men were gone, Jessica lit a fire in the fireplace. When they returned, Shannon watched as the two men burned clothes, destroyed cell phones, including hers, to tie her into their story, and cleaned the apartment with bleach and air freshener. The most chilling moment came when Shannon overheard one of them admit they had shot Nathan. This wasn't a robbery. It was a planned execution. Investigators quickly worked to confirm her account. Surveillance footage from the Sunset Station Hotel showed Michael and Shannon arriving together, but nearly 40 minutes after the shooting had already occurred. Far too late for his story to hold up. His alibi collapsed. Armed with Shannon's statement, detectives secured a search warrant for Jessica and Corey's apartment. Inside, they found latex gloves, bottles of air freshener, and remnants of burned clothing, all matching Shannon's description. Attention turned back to Michelle. Under another round of questioning, she finally admitted what detectives had long suspected. She had been having an affair with Michael. She claimed it was Michael who pushed for Nathan's death, motivated by the payout from Nathan's military life insurance policy. Together, they had planned a future once Nathan was gone. Michelle tried to downplay her role, insisting she had second thoughts. She said she never unlocked Nathan's truck as planned and even turned off his alarm, hoping he'd oversleep and avoid the ambush. But investigators didn't believe her. The text messages painted a very different picture, one of a willing accomplice, not a reluctant bystander. Meanwhile, Nathan's loved ones were left to grieve. On December 7, 2010, a private memorial service was held at the chapel of Nellis Air Force Base. His parents, siblings, and fellow airmen attended. Michelle was noticeably absent. Nathan was remembered as a proud aviator, a dedicated technical sergeant, and above all, a loving husband and father. His colleagues spoke of his tireless work ethic and the passion he brought to every duty. His brother Eric, holding back tears, described Nathan as a loyal and supportive sibling, someone who lifted others up and seemed incapable of making enemies. But even as the family mourned, the investigation pressed on. Within 6 days of the murder, detectives had connected the final pieces. On December 8, 2010, police arrested Michael Rodriguez, 31, Corey, 33, and Jessica, just 23. All three were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy. The day after the first arrests, detectives made one final move. Nathan's wife, Nathan Paet, 29, was taken into custody. She was charged with armed criminal action, conspiracy to commit a felony, and conspiracy to commit robbery. In her confession, Michelle admitted to a 6-month affair with Michael Rodriguez and acknowledged helping plan her husband's death. The two had imagined a future together, free of Nathan. But their scheme unraveled in less than a week, leaving behind a devastated family and a legacy of betrayal no one could have imagined. Investigators soon uncovered the full motive. Beyond her affair, Michelle stood to gain nearly $750,000 from Nathan's death, $400,000 from his military life insurance, plus another $250,000 from a separate policy. Under pressure, Michelle admitted she and Michael had been discussing killing Nathan as early as October 2010. She described the night of the murder, acknowledging she knew Michael and his accomplices were waiting outside, ready to ambush Nathan as soon as he stepped into the garage. When Nathan didn't leave on time, Michael began texting her. Her replies, written in coded contract language, were updates, confirming Nathan was late, but signaling the plan should still move forward. Even more chilling, Michelle admitted they had considered other ways to kill Nathan. One plan involved shooting him in his car and abandoning it at an apartment complex. Another involved kidnapping him, blindfolding him, and taking him to the desert to be tortured before being killed. Nathan, loyal and unsuspecting, never knew the woman he loved was plotting against him. Michelle was denied bail and placed under close watch at the Clark County Detention Center. She, Michael, Corey, and Jessica were all formally charged with murder with a deadly weapon and conspiracy. Because Michael and Corey were already convicted felons, they also faced additional firearm charges. In court, all four pleaded not guilty at first. Prosecutors even considered pursuing the death penalty, which caused years of legal delays. But by 2015, justice began to move forward. In September of that year, Michael Rodriguez accepted a plea deal to avoid execution. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The following month, Michelle stood before a judge and Nathan's grieving parents. Through tears, she apologized to them and to her children. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder with a deadly weapon. Though she claimed Michael pressured her, her text messages proved otherwise. She had been an active planner. In 2016, Corey also pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. His lawyer asked for the possibility of parole, but the judge denied it, calling him a continuing danger to society. He was sentenced to life without parole. Jessica, meanwhile, admitted to conspiracy to commit murder. Because her role had been smaller, she received a lighter punishment, reportedly house arrest. The final and most anticipated sentencing came on March 3, 2016. Michelle once again stood before the court, crying as she admitted Nathan had been a good man and that her choices were unforgivable. She begged her in-laws to someday forgive her. The prosecution, however, reminded the court that lonely wife syndrome was no excuse for plotting her husband's murder. They painted Michelle as a manipulator who used money, lies, and seduction to pull others into her scheme, all while pretending to be a devoted wife and mother at home. Her defense argued she had fallen under Michael's influence, but the judge rejected that claim. Nathan Paet, once seen as a loving wife and mother, was now forever marked as a conspirator in her husband's brutal murder. In his ruling, the judge described Michelle's actions as incomprehensible and deeply insidious. He said he could not understand how she had been able to sleep beside Nathan night after night, knowing she was secretly plotting his death. To the court, Michelle was not a victim of manipulation. She was an active participant. At the same hearing, Nathan's mother was granted guardianship of his 4 children. Speaking with quiet strength, she said that as a woman of faith, she chose to forgive Michelle for the sake of her own soul. But forgiveness did not erase the damage. She explained that the children remained traumatized, startled by loud noises, fearful, and scarred by the betrayal of their own mother. Michelle was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She would never walk free again. For Nathan's loved ones, the sentence closed a painful chapter, though the wounds of his loss could never fully heal. As the judge said in closing, nothing could undo the betrayal of a wife who turned her husband's devotion into a death sentence.